Hello, this is the synopsis for chapter 2 of the paperback book for Econ 500, the issues of macro issues of economics. So this chapter talks about growth and innovation. They start off by talking about the difference between invention and innovation. So basically, when you think about innovation, innovation simply transforms inventions into something that's beneficial to us. So there's a lot of inventions out there, but a lot of times these inventions aren't successful because people don't realize that they need something or it's not a want until if they don't know anything about it. So a lot of inventions, to be successful, they have to innovate and show people that they have a use for it or have a need for it. And so innovation is one thing, our inventions is one thing. There can be, millions of inventions, but innovation usually encompasses two key things. It either reduces the production costs of what we already have, or it provides new goods and services. So if you think about, I have here, think of communication via the telephone. So if one of the largest, it used to be really expensive to make long distance calls. One of the biggest household expenses and what people would really try to avoid was making long distance calls, because when the phone company was regulated, it was very expensive to make long distance phone calls. Well, now through, we all have cell phones. Long distance calls are free. So the telephone industry in particular has, through innovation, has the production costs are greatly reduced and the cost to consumers are greatly reduced. Also, innovation can provide new goods and services. So if you think about the computers, personal computers, the internet, and so forth, we have had incredible inventions and innovations over the last century, and during the 20th century. The 21st century, we'll see what happens. What I read way back in 2000 was, we really haven't seen anything yet as far as the pace of innovation. And so you can all think about how much your lives have changed through computers, and how much innovation has changed just your life. And just think about, but before the 1890s, we didn't even have electricity, and look at what we have today. And so they're saying that we're progressing at a much faster rate as far as with computers and so forth, things that we haven't even thought about. So anyway, what's the main, I guess the main takeaway of innovation, or the main benefit of innovation? Well, it's higher standards of living. So research and development leads to innovation, which leads to a much higher standard of living. And so today, later on in the book, they talk about poverty and, what an income disparity. And poverty today is nothing like what poverty used to be. So innovation raises all standards of living across all sociodemographic levels. So we have if you just think about it, we have a much higher standard of living typically than our parents, much more so than our grandparents and great grandparents and so forth. And that's mainly due to innovation. So then the next point in the chapter is that when we talk about economic growth, how is economic growth measured? Well, it's really measured by GDP, gross domestic product. That's a later chapter. But for now, let me just say that when you think about the annual amount of goods and services that are produced per person, that's economic growth. And so that's basically the definition of economic growth, is the annual amount of goods and services produced per person, which is the gross domestic product, GDP. Now, innovation is essential for economic growth. This country, we're great innovators in this country. These are the reasons why. You need these three elements for widespread innovation. You have to have protection. So in other words, we'll see more so in the hardback book when we talk about microeconomics, but in economics, one of the main tenets of economics is that people behave based on incentives. So if you incentivize people, you can incentivize people to innovate by offering protection. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you can get a patent to protect your invention or your innovation, you're going to be motivated to innovate, because if you spend all this time and effort to come up with a new product, a new invention or an innovation, changing an existing invention or what have you, you want to be able to make a profit off of that. And if somebody can just come along and copy it, you're not going to be motivated to be an entrepreneur or to have an invention or an innovation. So patents protect people's property rights. That's essential for widespread innovation. Copyrights also protect people's offer protection, and then trademarks. So patents, copyrights, and trademarks, all three of those are necessary for widespread innovation. Patents, oh, by the way, patents are usually for about 20 years. Okay, also there has to be a prospect for commercial success. So let me think about a couple examples. So the iPhone, we all carry around iPhones these days, either an iPhone or an Android. And I don't know about you, but I think FaceTiming is pretty widespread. Well, this always fascinates me about the whole FaceTiming thing, because when I was a kid in the 1960s, I remember going to the Museum of Man in San Diego, California. I'm from San Diego, and they had a video phone there at the museum. It was a telephone with a computer screen next to it, and you could pick up the phone and look at the person, on the screen that you were talking to. So if you watch old science fiction movies from the 60s and 70s, futuristic type movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, you'll see something like that where people are talking on the phone. And like in 2001: A Space Odyssey, he's talking on the phone to Earth, to his wife, and they're watching each other. Well, that technology had been around since the 60s. Nobody cared to do that, because nobody wanted to see themselves. If you didn't want to answer the phone in your house and look at and have somebody looking at you, so that there was really it just didn't have a prospect for commercial success, is the point I'm trying to make. So a lot of these inventions, they seem like a great idea, but they're not successful. The Google glasses, you probably have all heard of Google glasses, where supposedly, we were all supposed to be walking around wearing these glasses. We wouldn't have to have our cell phones. We would have these glasses that would be computers and do everything for us. That didn't take off. It's going to be interesting to see if all of this virtual stuff takes off, because there's all these new companies with these, the virtual goggles where you can get into a virtual world. So it's going to be really interesting to see if that takes off or not. So anyway, you can think of some other examples, but for an innovation or invention to be successful, it's got to have commercial success. All right. And then the commercial success has to yield rewards to the innovator. You've got to be able to make money off of it. Okay, so those are the three elements for widespread innovation. Now, innovation is very disruptive. Innovation, it can be disruptive to the current markets. So what we mean by that is, let's go back to the iPhone. How has the iPhone, or the smartphone, let's just say the smartphone, how has the smartphone disrupted the current markets? Well, it has pretty much been the death of the camera, been the death of watches. Unless you really want to wear a fashion watch, or they have smart watches now. So we've seen less demand for less demand for cameras, less demand for watches, less demand for clocks. Those are just to name a few. So, I mean, you can think of a lot of inventions that have come along, or a lot of innovations that have come along that have caused the demise of other products. So this is just a natural phenomenon. And so so innovation can be disruptive to current markets. And if that's suppressed, that's just a natural progression. And if that is suppressed, then basically what that does is it reduces the incentives and it reduces economic growth. So think about the too big to fail issue. Okay. Think about when we bailed out General Motors. So back during the Great Recession, the government decided that General Motors was too big to fail. So we bought all their bad debt, we being the taxpayers, and we bailed them out because we felt, the line that was given to us was, well, we can't let General Motors fail because there'll be so many jobs that are lost. It'll be too disruptive. So we're propping up basically a company that is not efficient. Now, in my opinion, and I've read this, that if we would have allowed General Motors to fail, I can pretty much guarantee you that another company would have gone into that area. Probably a Japanese company, who knows, but another company would have gone into that area. There would have been a transition, and they'd be more efficient, and there'd be jobs. So this too big to fail concept is really not a good idea because it suppresses innovation. It is suppressing economic growth and suppresses economic growth. It suppresses economic growth, and it's costing us. It's an inefficiency that's costing us money. I mean, you can take an extreme example. Think about back when the automobile was first invented. Well, initially when the automobile was invented, it wasn't a commercial success. People just thought of it as a novelty. They were still riding horse and buggy, but eventually the infrastructure was there. There were roads, and by that I mean roads and so forth. And they were able to make, thanks to Ford, with his assembly line process, they were able to make affordable vehicles. And now everyone has cars. We have much higher standard of living, much more efficiency. We can travel much further because of that. But what if the government back then decided, oh, these carriage companies, they're too big to fail. We have to keep the carriage companies going. Well, we would still have carriages. You see what I'm saying? So the too big to fail thing is wrong. Anyway, the point here is that innovation can be disruptive to current markets, but you have to let nature, it's kind of the survival of the fittest. You have to let this nature take its course, so to speak. And if a company, it's actually called creative destruction. I was trying to think of the term, just came to me. Creative destruction is the constant process of new innovations coming forward and old innovations dying. It's just a natural process, and you need to let these inefficient or these products or services that aren't viable anymore just fail, and people will be retrained and go to where the jobs are, so to speak. So it's a natural process. It's natural progression that we just need to let happen. Okay, so that's that. Let's look at the next topic here. So we said that innovation can be disruptive and you shouldn't suppress innovation. Taxes can also be disincentives for innovation. So if taxes are high, then that can hinder innovation. So lower taxes are better. Also, then at the end of the chapter, they talk about someone at the end of the chapter makes a statement that all of the easy inventions have been discovered, that we've basically invented everything there is to invent. There's really not much new stuff coming down the pike. Well, that's probably not the case, because how do we know what's not been invented? We have no idea what has not been invented. So I would say that probably that's not true, that there's plenty more inventions down the pike. But, you know, at the very least, you can say that we can expect a lot more innovation from a fundamental idea or a fundamental invention. So if you take the automobile, for example, you know, just think of how the automobile has evolved. We've gone from an automobile that has, you know, just the basics, to over the years, we now have automobiles with all-wheel drive, power steering, seat belts. That, you know, we didn't have seat belts until like the late 1960s. We have backup cameras, side cameras, you know, all these computers in the automobiles. So there's going to be a lot more innovation from a basic invention. So we're really, when you think about the automobile industry in particular, we're really in an interesting time in history right now. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with these electric cars, because I was reading that in Europe, they want to be net neutral, meaning they want to be all electric by like 2025. So in Europe, they're already, a lot of these auto manufacturers by 2025, they're saying that they're not going, like, for example, Porsche and Volkswagen, for example, by 2025, they're only going to be making electric versions of these certain automobiles. Now, President Biden has said that by 2050, I think it's 2050, he wants the US to be net neutral. Well, that's just not going to happen from what I've read, because people will keep their gas-powered vehicles typically for 10 to 20 years. And so if you think about, we would have to be selling so many electric vehicles just in the next few years for that to happen. So what I have read is they're saying that even by 2050, they still expect 60% of the vehicles on the road to be gas powered. So I wouldn't be worried about my gas powered vehicle, my combustible engine going out of style, or, you know, losing value and rushing out to buy an electric vehicle, because it's going to be a long time before we get to that point. And it's going to be really interesting to see if the combustible engine vehicles actually do go down in value, or if people want to keep their combustible engine and there's a market, more demand for them. But I will say this, one problem that we're facing, especially in Louisiana, or in most parts of the country, unless you live near a big city, we don't have the infrastructure to support these electric vehicles. And already we're seeing, I saw an article yesterday, and I think it was out of Homa. There was a pumping, electric pumping station, electric charging station rather, and there was a line of about 100 vehicles, because people are buying these electric cars, but they don't have the infrastructure yet. So anyway, point I'm making with all this is it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves, this change over from combustible engine to electric cars. Now in Europe, they have gas stations now that are switching over, and they're charging stations, or they'll have some charging stations, and you can plug your car in and then go in and have coffee, whatever, you know, you sit in a lounge, but still you're waiting for 20 to 30 minutes to charge your vehicle. So to me, personally, I'd rather have my combustible engine, because I don't think the technology is there yet. Plus I want to wait until the infrastructure catches up. And also, this is my last thought on that whole industry, is hurricane. What are you going to do when a hurricane comes? I would not be comfortable evacuating with an electric vehicle. And then when I get back, if I don't have power, I'm going to have a generator. I have to go get gas to plug my car into my generator. It's crazy. So anyway, I kind of got off on a rant there, but just, you can think about a lot of other examples of innovations and how disruptive they are. You can also think about the television industry, the streaming service versus cable and so forth. So lots of, always lots of interesting things going on in business and in innovation and inventions, with innovations and inventions and so forth. Okay, so anyway, those are the main points for chapter 2. So just think about growth and innovation, and think about some examples in addition, other than what I've talked about. And just remember that innovation is what innovations transform inventions that are useful to us, beneficial to us. For innovation to be essential, for innovation really to work, you have to have these elements. And it disrupts the markets. So the government can suppress innovation with this too big to fail mindset that they have. And taxes are also a disincentive for innovation. And we're probably going to continue to see increased innovation for the on into the future, because Americans in particular are very innovative. Our culture is very innovative. Okay, anyway, that's it for chapter 2, and I will see you next time. Take care.